Parshas Vayaira. Most of us rationalize our lack of full commitment to our faith, too. If only I had what so-and-so had, I would certainly be more dedicated, more committed. Let's examine the life of our forefather Abraham and see if this computes. We are all aware of the Mishnah in Pirkei Avos, Ethics of the Fathers, that Hashem tested Avram 10 times. There are different opinions as to what is the breakdown of the 10 tests. To simplify matters, we will examine Rashi's list. The first two have to do with his life before he came to Eretz Yisrael. He was a hunted dog for 10 years, who hid underground for espousing an ideology contrary to the idolatrous teachings of his time. Finally, he was caught. We have a tradition that he was thrown into a burning furnace and saved miraculously. This is known only because the Torah says regarding his brother Haran that Vayomas al Pnei Terech Aviv V'ur Kasdim, a reference to a story that Terach, his father, turned Avram over to the famous Nimrod, the king who reigned at the time. He threw Avraham in a burning furnace. Hashem saved him miraculously. Haran, on the other hand, was confused. He waited to see what would happen to his brother. When he was saved miraculously, he threw his lot in with Avram. But because his faith was not total, he was not worthy of a miracle, and he died bu'ur kasdim, in the furnace, in the fire of the furnace. If we analyze this, it seems that Avram more than proved himself as loyal to the one God, and it should have lived from that time on happily forever after. Actually, one of the great mysteries of the Torah is why this tradition is mentioned only by an allusion. This should have been on the front pages. We have a principle. The more space given to a narrative, a topic in the Torah, the more important it is in the eyes of Hashem. I will digress for a few minutes to explain the answer of the Alter of Slobodka. If we advance to the 8th test of Avram, we see that he was commanded to circumcise at an advanced age. Chazal tell us that he knew that he had to circumcise even before the commandment. He sought advice from his friends Aner, Eshkol, and Mamre, whether to wait to be commanded or initiate the mitzvah on his own. Avram was called Nediv Lev because he spent his life volunteering, but this mitzvah would be for his posterity. He understood that it is greater to perform a mitzvah that one is commanded to fulfill than to volunteer. But this put him in harm's way by waiting until he was old. In addition, he would be infirmed for more time, having to shut down his Eshel to some extent. This begins this week's Parsha. Hashem recognized this caused him great pain. So on the most painful day of his surgery, he caused an unusual chamsin. Rashi quotes the Chazal that Hashem was Hotzi Chama Meinartika. Hashem opened slightly the ozone layer, intensifying the sun's heat that nobody could go out in the streets. Hoping that this would console Avram, he paid him a special visit, teaching us the importance of Bikur Cholim. To the amazement of Hashem, this was not sufficient. He could see that Avram Avinu was uncomfortable. It is almost impossible to imagine such a being. As the story continues, Hashem sends angels in human form who show up at his house. Even if we could fathom how Avram excused himself from Hashem's presence, it still would not help to understand how he was able to get himself energized to the extent that he did. Read this section in the Torah and see how many times the word Vayimaher, he hurried, is mentioned. We have to pick up on all these subtleties. The Torah does not waste words. Now we come to the Alter's answer. If we compare the two events, in Ur Kasdim there was a burning furnace. The day of his circumcision was a burning furnace. Avram was in danger of losing his life in both infernos. He was weak from his surgery, old, 100 to be exact, running around in such intense heat. Both these events were Mesiras Nefesh. There was only one difference. The first was for his belief in one God against the false belief in idols. The second was to demonstrate that Hashem is the source of all chesed, of all kindliness. He has to be prepared to sacrifice his life to demonstrate that hospitality does not stop for anything. He would enlist the efforts of his wife and child to make it somewhat easier, but the show must go on. This event was so high-profiled because it transformed our whole perspective about everything that happens to us in life. It is all chesed. Everything that happened to this giant personality, if it was Hashem's will, he viewed it as the greatest kindness that one could imagine. He understood to the depth of his being that this is the way of Hashem. Therefore, the Mesiras Nefesh for this had to be profiled higher than throwing himself into the furnace. However, we notice that the term V'Elokim Nisa, Hashem tested, is used only in reference to his final test, the Akedah. There are so many reasons why this test was the most intense. He waited so long for Yitzchak. All those years he placed his hopes in so many other personalities for the future nation, starting with his students, Lot, Eliezer, culminating with Yishmael, never believing that it would be the child that would come from Sarah, especially. Chazal tell us she was wombless. He accepted this, but Hashem never stopped encouraging him until the miracle actualized. We must realize that we look different than all the other nations of the world. These differences make us the chosen nation. These qualities were embedded in our genetic code by our forefathers. If there was one missing of the three, it would not have been the same. Because we see how Avram treated every human being, seeing the vast greatness of man, understanding even if the universe would have been created for one man, it would have been justified. He saw the angels as mere wayfarers, and he treated them like kings. He slaughtered 3 animals to give each one a tongue dipped in mustard. He prayed for the most corrupt people that Hashem should spare them, even knowing that he could not influence them to abandon their corrupted ways. Try to imagine how much he loved Yitzchak. He saw this opportunity as the greatest kindness that could be given to him only because Hashem would do it for no other reason. The Medrash states the Akedah took place on Rosh Hashanah. Every year, the Jewish nation is spared from so many perils, misfortunes, hardships, just because during the blessings of Zichronos, we remind Hashem what Avraham Avinu did. Even if we look at our nation, so many assimilated, even the frum, not living up to the extent that they can to the ideals of our forefathers, living in spite of such illustrious times, and yet live such happy lives because of what Avraham Avinu did. Is that not the greatest chesed? If you will respond that what he did was for his children, but what about for his personal happiness? He lived not only for the afterlife, but to build a nation that would serve Hashem in the world as he did, with all his mind, heart, and soul. His joy even now is when he sees from above the greatness and uniqueness of his children.